Hi, and welcome back to Plastic Models by Regular Dude. And right now, on the viewer's choice build, Eduard MIG 21 PFM, I have just finished with most of the construction of the fuselage. I've still got a few seams that are drying up. Those are in clamps, so while those are drying up, I'm going to go ahead and start working on the rear spine part with the vertical stabilizer. Alright, I got these parts cut out and cleaned up, and here is a note to make if you build this kit. Now on one side of mine, it would have been in 42. It was slightly higher here than here. So that when these two parts were put together, even clamped, this seam right here would not disappear. So that is something to take into consideration. So what I did is, using the flat edge of my knife, I didn't sand it because I didn't want to take a chance of messing up the outside edge. I carefully scraped it down, again using the shiny versus dull plastic trick. I could tell where I was getting it scraped, and I just scraped it down. And I did it a little bit on the other side too, just in case, because it looked like there was a little bit of a ridge a little bit closer. So did the same thing. Then I put them together, and using my clamps, just clamped it together to check and make sure that it was contacting all the way down, which it was. Now, one other thing I needed to do, and again, this may not be on every kit, but where there is a, you can probably see it right in there. There is a locating pin, and where the locating pin goes in, there's a little raised spot around that circular spot, so I had to shave that down as well. And it's just going to take a bit of clamping just to make sure everything fits together properly. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cement this part all the way around and not cement that part yet. I'm going to get this all nice and secured, and then I can move on to the rest of it. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to make sure it's lined up in the back. Now you can use, to make sure it's all lined up, you can use, there's some panel lines there, and then down here there's this little raised spot here. Just make sure that is lined up, and that will ensure that your panel lines are all lined up properly. So then I'm just gonna glue this whole part here, and then I'll move on to the other spots. So let's do this. I'll clamp the top here, and then squeeze it by hand here and start applying the cement in that seam kind of clamp it as I go. Make sure it's still lined up. And then I'll let that cure up, and then I'll move on to the other parts. Do a quick check here and make sure it's still lined up. Yeah, all right, so we'll let that cure up for a minute. Okay, so as you can see, I've got it all glued into place, just clamping slowly along, trying to keep everything as aligned as possible and making sure that my panel lines stayed aligned. That way, if I do need to rescribe a little bit where I have to sand it, it'll be a lot easier to keep it straight. And then put this little stiffener part in there. So that's drying up, and the last part of the fuselage is drying up, so I'll come back here directly and glue that part onto the top of the fuselage. Alright, all this has been cemented together, and now I need to put this spine piece on. So it's been cemented all together, and it fits. There's this tab here, fits into a slot here, just like that. Now I'm gonna have to, do again, like I've done on other aspects of this build, and start from one end and work to the other. And actually, in this case, I'm gonna be working from the middle here. And gluing it together in the middle first, and then working my way up here and then back here. And the reason being, this part here seems to be the part that's humped up a bit. So in order to get it to sit flush, I'm going to have to clamp it in the middle like that. As you can see, that's getting that on there pretty good. It looks like it's, maintaining its vertical stability. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this side first, and then I'll do the other side. So first thing I need to do is I need to, and just for the record, it fits really well where it's supposed to. I mean, it lines up nicely in the along the other parts here where these panel lines and stuff go. So first thing I'm going to do is put a little cement there, since that's where I want to start. And this part may take me a bit because I'm gonna have to work slowly and evenly down this thing, so I get a nice tight seam. I don't want to have to do any filling in those corners. So I've got that put on there. So I think while that's drying, I'm going to go ahead, skip over to page 6, which starts with working on the wings. Okay, before I start cutting all these parts off and gluing stuff, I thought I would check the fit of the upper and lower wing portions. So it looks like now it fits really nicely there where that seam or that panel line is. I mean, it's like super tight. It looks just like one of these other panel lines. However, I'm running into the same thing I ran into on the vertical stabilizer, or whatever you want to call it, where the way it's molded, these edges are not coming together completely along this seam. So I'm going to have to do the same thing on these wings as I did on that, and kind of shave this part down right along here on both surfaces to make sure that these leading edges are nice and tight and closed up. So I don't know why it's like that, but it is, and it's not that big of a deal to overcome. It's just a little bit of an annoyance, but you know, no big deal. But you know, I'll do that and it'll take care of it just like it did on that. So I'm going to start working on that and then test fit again before I start working on these other parts. Okay, I think I've got the wings adequately shaved down for what I need. So the first thing I'm going to do before I start gluing any parts on here is I need to cut out some tiny holes here, and then I need to drill out some holes here, here, and here. So I'm going to do those first. Now, one thing to note, if the air brakes are going to be open, this portion right here needs to be cut out. I'm not having the air brakes open, therefore I do not need to cut it out. As for the holes, I am using, out of my numerical drill bit set here, a number 62. What I did is D9, I believe is the part number, is this part right here, and those are the pins that need to fit through the holes that I'm fitting to drill here. So I checked it out and it looks like these are the right size and they are not too wide that they won't be covered by this this pylon here. So that's what I'm going to go with. So I need to drill one here and here, here and here, here and here. Then for these here, it's a little small spot right here, so I'm going to use a smaller bit, drill those out, and then use a nice sharp knife and square those holes off a little bit in that rectangular opening. So keeping it as perpendicular as I can. Hopefully, because here is the corresponding marking right there. So hopefully this will come out right on target. So we'll see. So be careful. Don't put your finger right here, because if you're like me, you don't need any extra holes in your fingers. All right, pretty much dead on. Okay, so there it is. So that's where that pylon's going to mount. So I'm going to go ahead and drill the rest of those holes and then come back and I can start cementing some of these parts on. Okay, as you can see, the holes are drilled, and here is an example of the first hole. It has to be rectangular shaped. So I used, for that one, I used the number 70 bit, and then just drilled it at either end as cleanly as possible. And then, like I said previously, just using this sharp blade, flattened out the sides and sharpened up the corners so I get a pretty decent slot going on there. Alright, I'm taking a big risk here. D65 goes right in that little spot right there. Now, looking at this part, you can see it's got a flat spot. There's a flat spot on the top and the bottom. The one on the bottom, and I'm not going to flip this over, is a little bit smaller, and it seems to fit the best in that spot right there. So I would suggest putting that side down. And there's also like a little fitting looking thing, and it looks like it goes forward. So that's what I'm doing here. So first, I'm going to carefully and hopefully apply some cement there, and then make sure that it's facing the right direction as near as I can tell, and then make sure it is seated in nice and flush on the bottom. Okay, so then the next one is this piece here that's 3 linked together, and it looks like can't really tell. There's a fitting on this side and a fitting on that side, and I can't tell which one, which direction it goes. It looks like it goes that direction. And again, let's see, one is flat only on one side, and according to this illustration, there's flat parts there, and then the round part. So that is the way that one is going to go in place. These round things are really hard to hold on to. Okay, so there it is. There we go. It just dropped into place. Perfect. Let's put a little bit on there just to get it where it holds in place. You don't want that coming off once you get all this together. Okay, so that's in place. Make sure that's seated in well, like that. Okay, so that's good. And then the last one is D47. And that one fits here. And it looks like the little fitting faces that way. So I want to make sure that is nice and flat, because that's where it was attached to the sprue. Alrighty, you got to be careful with these because these will go flying because they're round. That. And there that is. So make sure that's pressed into place nice and solidly. Okay. Then the last part of those little pieces there is this clear part, which is G2. And then on the instructions here, it shows a little star, which means to use the Eduard mask. On the other side, for whenever the aircraft is painted. So we'll set that in place there. That fits nicely. So I'm going to use some of this clear part cement. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of that on here, run it around the outside edge. So I do not want that part popping off inside the fuselage, because that would be quite hard. And there we go. Okay. That is in place. So now I basically have to do the same thing on this other side. The parts are a little bit different. There's two of these 3-piece clumps. Other than that, it's basically the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and glue those parts on, and then we'll move on to this stuff here. Okay, the next parts are on this side of the wing, C13, C17, 29. So I've got the parts cut out and cleaned up, and it's just a matter of lining them up and gluing them in place. Then now on this piece there's an angle here that matches the angle here, so this angle and that angle match. So, and there's also ribbing detail that needs to face the opening, so it's going to fit here like that and line up with this ridge that's on that part. So I'm going to get that lined up like that. And glue it in place. Make sure it's pressed in nice and snug. Whoops. Like that. And then this part here, in this case C29, has a notch, a beveled edge that goes all the way across. That fits in this slot right here, like that. Make sure that's pressed into place real nicely. And voila. So that is done. Right there. That will eventually go on there. I just kind of want to take a look and see what it looks like. Yeah. Once that's in place, then I can paint it with the interior color. So next I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. Same parts, just the opposite side. Okay, so this is all complete with all of the supports around the landing gear doors. So the next thing I need to do is I think I'm going to start smoothing out some of these seams. I've already started here. You can see it's a little duller, but it sanded out really nicely. So I'm going to get me a new sanding stick here of the very smooth variety and start working on that. Then once I do that, I can attach this and the lower wing into place. Now I did some test fitting, and in getting everything positioned properly, this side right here, the seam is here, this side here was stepped up ever so slightly from this, but whenever this was in place, it bottomed out on one side but not the other. So to make it even all the way across, I just used my knife and gently scraped even pressure all the way across down to the seam until I had it even all the way across. So that way when I cement it together, it will it'll look a little bit better. So I'm going to start sanding on this stuff, and I'm not going to, you know, do it on camera because it'll be a slow and tedious thing, but basically it's just a matter of sanding those seam lines down, and then I'll check and see if I need to rescribe any of these panel lines if I lose anything. So I'm going to work on that a little bit once I get it done, and I'll come back and we'll take a look at the panel lines. Okay, so I got it glued in the front here after I got it cleaned up. So now I just need to apply some adhesive back here, or some cement back here, and make sure this is in place nicely. And the nice thing is about the seam here, it falls on a natural panel line of the actual aircraft, so that's pretty good. So I'll get this glued here. Let's see what I got. All right, so I've got that done. So now I'm going to cut off all these parts here and get them ready to glue into place. So I'm going to start cutting those off and then start gluing them on. All right, so here are the parts in place. This one, and this one here, and they all fit pretty positively. This one here has like a little, almost like a hook type part that fits into an indentation right here. So it's just a matter of getting that in placing and lining it up. This one here, it doesn't really have any kind of lineup, but it's fairly easy to position correctly. So I'm going to do the other side, those parts on the other side, before I actually do the stabilizers. So I figured I'd show you what this looks like. Hopefully you can see it's got that little like hook right on the point part, and it fits right there. So all I do is just put a little dab of cement in this part here, or it'll puddle up a little bit, and then a little bit here. Get it in place. Once it's located, take a little bit more cement right underneath this edge here, let it wick underneath, and then just give it a little press to make sure it's locked in. And then I can move on to the next part. So here it sits, got the stabilizers on, so I'm done. Okay, so here it sits. All those parts were put on. I put the stabilizers on, so I am done up to page 6. So the next time when I come back, I'll be working on the upper part of the wings, details there, and looks like some of the photo etch parts and so on. Looks like I'm even getting into some of the pylons and stuff as well down here. So next time we come back, it'll be page 7. So thanks for joining me here on Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and the viewer's choice build number 2, the Eduard 1/48 scale MIG 21 PFM. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, anything like that, please post them in the comments below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So until next time, I will see you later.